All right, now the first thing that I wanted to do is it's like a little bit of energy work. I thought, hey, it's spring forward, and this is the perfect time to get a little energy going in the sanctuary because it's really for me, and you guys are just getting the byproduct. All right, so this is what the last time I was at a Unity conference, a lady got up and showed us some great things to connect us to our energy. The first thing are the 4 thumps. Doesn't that sound like fun? Thumps. Okay, so everybody can do this with me. One place to thump yourself is on your cheekbones, just like about 4 times. Just thump. All right, right underneath your collarbone, right here, a little bit of thumping. In your thymus, which is kind of right in the middle here, that's a good thump. And your rib cage, kind of here, if you want to giggle, that's okay. All right. And one more thing, if you feel like standing up, you can do this. It's just this thing, the crossover thing, or you can do it seated. And that's good. So now we should all feel a little more alive, awake, alert, and enthusiastic. Just a tiny little bit more like that, which is good. I want to talk to you this topic that I've been going on this month is really kind of like a split mind because I'm talking about a little bit of the history of the historical person Jesus, and I'm also because I like to get back to that source, and I'm fascinated by what we do know in history. And then the other part of me, what's the point of it? Is the idea of the cosmic Christ? How does it matter to me what somebody did 2,000 years ago, even though I'm interested in the historical details and how this idea caught on? I'm also interested in the idea in each of our hearts. How do we embody the cosmic Christ? What is the point of it? What do I even mean by the cosmic Christ? And really, when I say the cosmic Christ, I mean the part of us that we know is inherently spirit, that is divine, or also that is one with the greater spirit and everybody here and all of creation. So it's a pretty big concept. And I just realized it is the way I am. My mind often goes off in 2 directions at once. So this month you get all of my Gemini-ness in the historical Jesus in the cosmic Christ. I'm going to start with something that has nothing to do, in a way, with either subject. Last week, we prayed for my sister-in-law, Denise, who was making her transition. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories. And please understand, I'm talking about stories that I made up about Denise. You don't know her, and all of this is just what went on in my head, not about her, but it is about us. Last Friday, I think, we got a call that Denise went into the hospital, and this is what I thought. I thought she went in for pneumonia, and then on Saturday she found out she had cancer, and by Saturday she was unconscious, and Sunday she died. And, of course, that was very sad for me and sad for Roland. And it's also very shocking because, Denise is the first sibling in our family, who, of me and Roland, who's passed. And also, she's like my age, so it's like it feels real. And my mortality, etc. And the other thing is that, so I make up a little bit of a story. I think, well, the good thing about it, and it comforts me to think that the last year or so, Denise has been living with her daughter, and her daughter had a baby. And Denise has also been connecting with her son, who has a 3-year-old. So in my mind, it's not so sad because the last couple years of Denise's life, she reconnected to her kids and was there for her grandkids. And that may or may not be true. Right? It may or may not be true. But it was a story that I told that made me feel connected to Denise, and also it was a story that made it be okay. It somehow took the edge off of whatever was real about, somebody who dies, somebody I know who dies, somebody who I love who's gone. And then here's another story. After a couple of days, Roland's sister Renee went out to Texas to be with Denise's kids, and they had a very small service the Monday after she died, just in their home. And Renee said, well, Denise must have known, because she clearly knew, and she decided to do this journey alone. She knew she had some kind of cancer, was not a big fan of Western medicine, and also, as I also have this quality, does not like people telling her what to do. So somehow she didn't want to share this. And she also made some preparations in July about, insurance and stuff like that, something would happen, how she took care of what would happen when she died. That's what Renee said. And then I'm thinking, wow, that makes a whole different story for me. It makes a whole different story. And then I have a whole bunch of upwelling of feeling sad. And and why would you want to do that alone? I mean, I would want everybody around me to help me. I think, I'm not sure. I don't even like to have a headache by myself. I like a little empathy and a little sympathy. But please hear, this is another story. It has really nothing to do with Denise. I do not know anything about Denise because I did not talk to her about this, And even Renee did not talk to her about this, And then, so I'm grappling with this, and one of the things I realize is that all of us tell stories, and it's very important for us that the stories we tell, we use them as mirrors. So for me, this story isn't about Denise. It's for me to recognize what's in myself, what do I need to heal, what do I need to deal with about anybody dying, about me dying, about my life. What do I need to grapple with? And the other thing is taking the stories we make up and creating a new story that serves us and the world better. So for me, here's how I take these stories and have meaning in my life, is that I do believe that we are here together to take the journey. And that when important things happen to us, it really is important to have people to share with, if for no other reason than people are there to show us our blind spots, no matter what, I do not see my own blind spots. They're my blind spots. I can't see them. And if I take my journey with other people, they help me. They help me show the blind spots. And also, I just believe I get to a higher consciousness with other people. Now, the other thing about that is that it's so interesting about stories, because a lot of what we know about this Jesus person, pretty much it's really stories. There's the part that's inner, the Christ conscious, the cosmic Christ has got to be inner. But the stories about Jesus and this whole Christianity thing, really, they're about stories. And what do we do with the stories? So here's a little bit of further investigation. We've got this is a map. There's the Sea of Galilee. That's just to show that this is of first century Galilee. That may be interesting or not. It just kind of to show that we've got some history, right? We're learning a little history. So this is a picture of an archaeological site. I think it actually is Sepphoris, or a Greek city, but it's an archaeological site of first century current era. All right? Here we go. This is the first century Galilee. Galilee was a land of mixed people because it was a crossroads and a buffer zone for many, surrounding petty kingdoms which were city-states. Carmel, Ptolemais, Gaba, however you say that, Hippos, Gadara, and some other things I don't even want to try to say. It's the same as some of the cities. Galilee had no capital city, so it was an area. No king, no temple, and no hierarchy of priests. It was known to the Jews as the land of the Gentiles. There were little or no Pharisees in Galilee at this time. Galilee supported a vibrant and productive society. It was ideally situated on the commercial routes to take advantage of the increased trade and commerce of the Hellenistic age. So it's kind of a happening place. And it's one of the things I want to emphasize, it's a whole bunch of different cross cultures, okay? Lots of people are coming through there. This is just a painting of first century CE. It's a Roman painting. It's in Pompeii, but it's an example. There's not a lot from that time of painting. I just wanted us to see, like, that's a painting in a house. So you might see something like that in a house, a rich person's house, I'm guessing, at that time. Here's about the economy. Southern Galilee was a land of rolling hills and fertile valleys and was gifted with Mediterranean climate. Doesn't that sound good? Especially heavy rainfall, it had been a vital part of the northern kingdom of Israel as opposed to the arid climate and rugged hills of Judea. That's just a reference to the two kingdoms in the Old Testament. All right. It was crisscrossed with trade routes, and it was famous for its grains, olive oil, grapes, and wines, fruits, nuts, figs, and dates, and fish from the Sea of Galilee. Much wheat and barley was also cultivated. Herod the Great, as a part of his colonization policy, allocated small private holdings rather than large tracts under single ownership, which formed the dominant pattern of the productive economy in the area. So that was actually a kind of a different thing for that area, that it, in a way, so more people had a little bit of land. It's like that. That's just some cups from the era. They're stone cups. I just thought they were interesting. There's not a lot of things when you look up from the area at that time. The culture, 300 years of Hellenistic influence before the time of Jesus is an especially important factor, and it is significant that southern Galilee, the region of Nazareth, was largely Greek-speaking. That was the language of the people. Since Alexander, the lingua franca, which just means the language people are talking about, of commerce in the Near East has been Koine Greek, or Koine Greek, the greatly simplified common language of merchants, sailors, and soldiers. The people of Galilee were very much a part of the Greco-Roman world. Herod, who spent much of his time in Galilee, was a great promoter of all things Greek. They were fully aware of the Second Temple era cultural and intellectual forces surging through the Levant, which is just that greater area. They were the cultural mix that stimulated thought and produced social experimentation in response to the times. They were the cultural mix, okay, that brought about, it was like things were they were ready for something new. I like this. I've shown it before, maybe not recently, but the Galilee boat. It's a 2,000-year-old fishing vessel recovered from the mud bottom of the Sea of Galilee in 1986. So this boat is dated to 40 CE, plus or minus 80 years, but the boat could have been sailed or rowed. If under sail, it would have been outfitted with a single square sail and mast, and based on the size of the boat, the crew would likely have consisted of a captain and 4 to 5 rowers. It just seems kind of like, wow, you want to get a little bit in touch with that time. Here's the attitudes of the people of Galilee to Jesus. The history of foreign conquests had created disaffection and a predisposition for social and cultural critique. That means people were going around and dissing on their leaders. Does that sound familiar? Do you have a feel for that? The mix of indigenous Hellenistic, Jewish, and Roman cultures had distributed social equilibrium enough to challenge the people of Galilee into radical action. Well, I think that just means that they weren't just a member of their own culture. So they were starting to have a different perspective, as if their blind spots were being shown up. The blind spots of their culture were being shown up. So they're thinking, well, we don't have to put up with things the way they were. And it appears that the people of Galilee were entirely capable of entertaining novel notions of social identity. So they were also ready for a new culture, In fact, these people were the people of Q, who became the early dedicated followers of the young living teacher Jesus. And this is just a theory, of course. All of this is just a theory because nobody I know has gone back in time to find it out. But it's very interesting to think about that in this time of unrest and change and all these cultures coming together, that the actual people who were the first people who listened to Jesus, we think, Bible scholars, of which I am not one, consider them the people of Q. This is really interesting to me. And so the early followers of Jesus, they explored a novel combination of these three ideas. The idea of a perfect society that was a real possibility, not just in their hearts and minds, but in their actual living together. They were excited about that. The idea that anyone was fit for this society who lived as if they belonged. It's an interesting concept. The idea that a mixture of people was what the kingdom of God should look like. Okay? It should be, that's kind of like diversity, right? People gathered to talk about these ideas, and these are the 5 groups that historians and Bible scholars, maybe on the leading edge or the liberal edge have discovered. So the community of Q, who produced the Sayings Gospel Q, the Jesus School that produced the pre-Markan stories, the true disciples who produced the Gospel of Thomas, the congregation of Israel who composed miracle stories, the Jerusalem pillars based only on the letters of Paul. And each of these, it doesn't say here on this slide, but they happen in time after each other. And notably, the Jerusalem pillars based on the letters of Paul, because Paul never did listen to Jesus, and he wrote 90 years after Jesus was around. Each group developed different views and practices. So here's the thing we're grappling with, hopefully. Each group developed different views. This runs contrary to the traditional picture that Jesus knew from the beginning what was required of him to establish the Christian church. This is just a Magdala stone at the archaeological site in Galilee. This historic site contains a synagogue from the Second Temple period, which is 50 BCE to 100 CE. Jesus is right around 30 CE, current era, where the stone is found. So the stone features a 7-branched menorah carved on one of its faces, the oldest such representation ever discovered. All right, so I think that's all the pictures. Thank you. Thank you, my men in the booth. I want to leave you with a couple more ideas before we go on. Here we go. This is what a lady called Maya Katrositz wrote. I want to suggest then, rather than static truths about Jesus or God, early Christian texts represent a number of creative and improvised ways of trying to make sense of who one is, where one belongs, and what God means in the face of loss. Okay, so think about that. That it opens up the Bible stories, it opens it up a little bit, right? So that the people then, even though we are so much more technologically advanced, maybe there's not that much difference. Sometimes I feel very not connected to people from 2,000 years ago. But maybe they were all looking for the same thing. Who are we? Who is God? What is God? How is God in me? And how do I deal with the garbage that happens to me and happens to everybody, the loss, How do I deal with that? So looking at the story, I have to find some way to look at the Christian story so that it makes sense to me now. And I have to look at it, I definitely, and most people in Unity, have to look at it different than that Jesus died for your sins. Because that is actually a pretty narrow version. That's a narrow version. Instead, think about an alive person who's going around rabble-rousing, as it were. We'll get to that part next week about some of the things that maybe Jesus said that were actually dramatically different, or some of the things he taught were to get people thinking in a new way. So think about that the meaning that each of us has to pull into it, because somehow, even though we found ourselves to unity, there's, even if you never even take that into your, even if the Christian story isn't your story, or the Easter story isn't your story, and you're in unity and you don't worry about how Jesus died for our sins, it's still in our culture, right? It's still definitely in our culture, and it's pretty much embedded in us a little bit. Some of it is embedded. So it's really worthwhile to look at it, explore it, however you want to do it, whether you want to explore the history of it, or whether you want to explore the cosmic Christ in yourself. And one of the things that we're doing this Easter to make it different is, of course, we have a Easter celebration on Easter Sunday. That's going to be, it's always different a little bit. It's going to be a little interactive because we want to stress the community part. And one thing we're doing new this year is on Good Friday, we're having a community supper. It's going to be a little more than a potluck and a little less than a sit-down catered dinner. Meaning, it's just about coming together in community. Chris does have some wonderful, excellent music for us. We're going to have a bit of time for praying and grace. But the main part of this is that we are going to share a meal together. We'll be sitting up here in the tables, and the commercial is, I do want to know if you're coming so we know how to prepare it and what you're going to bring and all that. But we're going to have a community meal. If you can come and be a part of this community, very much harking back to what the people who were first followed this Jesus person did. So that's my invitation to you, and continue to explore the cosmic Christ. Let's take an offering for unity. I invite you to take out a tithe and a love offering and put it in your hand.